Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 192, where we're going to talk about emotional delegation. I've also referred to this at times as emotional outsourcing, and we've talked about this many times on the podcast. It's been woven into various episodes, but I've never talked about it this directly. I've never made an episode entitled Emotional Delegation 101. So today I want to clearly define it and help you see how it may be playing into your relationship challenges, because it really is a huge underlying habit that pretty much everyone falls into that really hurts our relationships and just generally feels bad and really makes you quite powerless or at the mercy of your partner's worst aspects or traits or habits. Now, before we dive in, I want to mention two things. One is, I hope you're doing okay. I hope that all the heartbreak, all the hard things that we are experiencing in our world, kind of collectively, especially in certain places like the US, I hope you're allowing yourself to feel the pain, but not wallowing in it, right? There's a difference between healthy grief, or what I might call clean pain, and dirty pain, and like the wallowing and letting it all totally drag you down. All feelings are valid, and some of them like drag us down more than they need to. So let yourself feel it, but I invite you to not get lost in dwelling on it all, and really letting yourself become almost a victim to the pain in the world. If you're interested, you can listen to one of my episodes. It's called Clean Pain versus Dirty Pain. That could be really helpful for you right now. And of course, we're going to be talking more about emotions in today's episode. So definitely stick around for that. But before we get to that, I did want to say thank you to Love Warrior 99 for leaving this beautiful review of the podcast. She wrote, "Where has this woman been all my life? I've gotten so much from listening to Hannah's podcast, and I'm so glad to be on the journey to true authenticity, healing, and open-heartedness. I truly believe that this is such important work that ripples out into the community world, and I'm proud to be on this journey of letting love flow. Thank you, Hannah, for your wisdom and sharing this message." So thank you, Love Warrior 99. That was so beautiful to read and helps me to recognize that I am achieving my goal of pretty much everything you just said. Because that is ultimately my goal, is helping more love flow in this world and creating more authenticity, healing, and open-heartedness, not just in all of your relationships, but really between all relationships, between all people, even between all creatures on this earth. So thank you for this beautiful review of the podcast. And I invite everybody listening, if you've been enjoying this podcast, if it's helped you at all, to head over to Apple Podcasts, or maybe there's other podcast platforms that you can leave reviews on. It's most helpful for me if you leave it on Apple Podcasts. But to go over there, leave a 5-star review, and write a little synopsis like this. Means so much to me. It really does help the podcast reach more people, and it's just really heartwarming to me to hear from you all. So go ahead and do that if you haven't, and hit subscribe while you're at it if you haven't done that already. All right, let's dive in. So I want to say, really loud and clear up front, that although emotional delegation can really hurt our relationships, we are not bad or wrong when we emotionally delegate. I'm going to say more about this throughout this episode, but I really want to lead with that. It is very human. It's a very human thing to emotionally delegate. And bringing an attitude of self-acceptance and kindness and love to this habit that we fall into is really going to actually help you not just feel better, but it's also going to help you be better at letting go of doing it, of emotionally delegating. So as you listen, please wrap yourself in kindness and self-acceptance and compassion and love. And you can also listen to this episode with an ear out for how your partner may also be emotionally delegating and bring that same compassionate attitude to them as well, because they're human after all. I also want to say early on here that understanding emotional delegation can help with protection boundaries. Now, I recently made an episode about that. That's why I'm talking about it now. And the protection boundaries are one of the psychological or energetic boundaries we talked about in episode 188. In fact, beyond what I taught you in that episode about how to begin building these protection boundaries, learning about emotional delegation and how to quit doing it is absolutely the strongest protection boundary you can build. In other words, when you stop emotionally delegating, you suddenly have so much more innate protection boundaries naturally, along with way more emotional agency, meaning way more power to feel how you want to feel and stop feeling how you don't want to feel, regardless of what's happening out in the external world, right? Regardless of what your partner's doing or not doing. Not to mention, you'll have so much power to be able to be the person you truly want to be in your marriage and really make your marriage what you want it to be when you stop emotionally delegating. So in other words, still, when you no longer emotionally delegate, you'll have so much more control, for lack of a more specific word, over your feelings, regardless of external circumstances. And you'll have so much more control over how your relationship goes. So today, I mainly want to get you the concept of emotional delegation in sort of a more succinct way. Again, this concept has been deeply infused in pretty much all of my episodes to some degree. Like, this is one of the most foundational concepts. I just haven't isolated it fully for you yet. And that's what this episode's going to do. But understanding it intellectually is really an important step to stop doing it and to gaining emotional agency. Now, emotional agency is what I've also called, you may have heard me call it emotional sovereignty or emotional insourcing. Those are pretty much the same things. I sometimes use different words to describe it. And that emotional agency is probably the most important thing when it comes to having a great loving relationship and really a great life in general, in all realms. And again, I've really been teaching this over this entire podcast. And of course, I teach it in even much more depth, really, to my clients, so they become masters at it. But let's start with, what is emotional delegation? So the basic definition is emotional delegation is when you put responsibility for your feelings in other people's hands, like your partner's. When you unconsciously allow your feelings to ride on what someone else says or does, like on their actions or their words or their behaviors. We could also put it like this. Emotional delegation is when you think your feelings come from outside of yourself, from other people's behavior. When you think that is how it works, you're automatically going to give them the power to make you feel a certain way, even though it is not their actions that make you feel a certain way. So emotional delegation is essentially handing over your feelings to your partner or whoever. In the next episode, I'm going to help you understand this even better and where your feelings really come from. So do consider the next episode an extension of this episode and tune into that. But for now, understanding emotional delegation, at least intellectually, really is the first step to healing and taking back the power over your feelings. And we need all the help we can get with that, because emotional delegation is so ingrained in our culture. It's really rampant. Why? Because of both nature and nurture. So as children, we really can't discern that feelings don't come from others' actions or outside circumstances. So we believe They do. And that's totally normal and natural. But then as we grow, we keep getting that same idea reinforced. Our culture has definitely taught us that other people make us feel a certain way, or outside circumstances make us feel a certain way. So all your life, I'm willing to bet, you've probably heard your parents, your teachers, or your friends, or all of them say things like, oh, she made me angry. Oh, Sam made you sad. Aw, right? That's emotional delegation. That's teaching emotional delegation. It's very embedded in our everyday language, right? Anytime you hear yourself or someone else think or say, you made me feel, Aaron made me feel, every time we use that language, we are perpetuating and reinforcing this idea that emotions come from other people, that other people make us feel a certain way, which is emotional delegation in a nutshell. And we use this language so much that we're not even aware that we're teaching each other that other people are responsible for our feelings, like every day. And that just really deepens this habit that we have and makes us really blind to the fact that it's a lie. So that's the nurture part mostly, right? We get taught that, we get nurtured, that gets nurtured into us. But of course, there's also the nature part. Nature also contributes to this habit of emotionally delegating. And it works like this. As soon as we feel fear or anger or upset, our brains naturally start to look for something or someone to blame, some cause for it. And this, of course, makes sense. Like, it's a survival instinct, right? The brain really just naturally has this tendency to want to look outside for where the problem is coming from. That's one way that it protects. Now, we don't instinctively tend to look at ourselves as a source for the pain and the feelings we're having, even though what is going on inside of us is the source. But the brain's habituated response is not to blame ourselves generally, or to turn inwards to see where feelings are really coming from, but instead it tends to automatically look outside of ourselves for the source of the problem, like at our partner, right? It's just instinct, at least in the world we've been raised in. So again, that gets reinforced by nurture. So it's completely rampant to emotionally delegate and to believe that feelings come from external circumstances. And since we aren't taught otherwise, pretty much everybody walks around delegating their emotions, blaming their emotions on other people, outsourcing their emotions to other people. So we blame or make other people or other things responsible for our feelings and our actions. We blame our parents for how we feel and how we behave. We blame our relatives, our exes, our friends for our feelings. We blame the government. We blame the economy for how we feel and what we do. We blame our neighbor. We blame the dog. But maybe more than all of this, we blame our significant other for how we feel and how we react. This is not helpful. You've heard me say before, probably, that our brains are more wired to survive than to thrive. And this is a perfect example. Because we cannot thrive in love if we're making other people responsible for our feelings. We just can't, unless they're perfect. Because when we're looking outside of ourselves, like at our partner, as the source of our feelings, as the source of our problems, what we're doing is giving them all of the power over how we feel. When you think that something your partner says is the source of your hurt or your anger or your pain, or is the source of your worth or your lovableness or your joy, it's basically giving your partner control over your emotional well-being. That's delegating. And the result of giving your partner all that power, delegating your emotions to him, is that it leaves you 100% at your partner's mercy. Like totally powerless over your own life. Like your life, your emotions are in his hands. This is a completely disempowered place to be. And it's a major problem for our relationships. So let's look at what it looks like so that you can know if you are emotionally delegating. And again, most people are, so your answer is probably going to be yes, at least to some degree. But again, before we do so, please just really hear me. I shared why emotional delegation is rampant, in large part to help you understand it's not something to be ashamed about. Again, it's very human in our modern world. You were shaped to emotionally delegate, even though it's detrimental. And that's not your fault. You didn't shape you on your own, at least, right? And almost all of us do it until we learn how not to. So, with that in mind, obvious signs that you're emotionally delegating are, like, have you ever said or thought the words, I'm sad because he, I'm mad because he, ... right? Or I yelled because he XYZ, right? Fill in the blank. So those are clear examples of emotional delegation. Or maybe you've told your friend, like, he made me so upset yesterday. My husband made me so mad yesterday. That's emotional delegation, right? That's blaming him. That's making him responsible for how you felt. So it can also look like thinking your partner needs to open doors for you or make love to you often for you to feel cared for. Or needing his words of affirmation, like, hey, you look great today, honey, to affirm that you're beautiful. Or to feel good about your cooking, you might rely on him complimenting the meal you made. Or when he makes a joke that you don't see as a joke or as funny. I know a lot of guys do that. I hear my clients talking about this all the time, and I've seen it in my own relationships as well. But when your partner makes a joke that you don't think is funny or you don't really think is a real joke, and you feel angry or annoyed or hurt, that's also emotionally delegating. So taking things personally is emotionally delegating. And when he looks at his phone, when you're speaking to him and you feel hurt, that's emotional delegation. Not wanting him to be upset so you can feel okay, that's emotional delegation too. Same with when you don't feel loved unless he tells you that he loves you all the time. And if you're unable to feel calm when he leaves his socks again on the floor, that's also emotional delegation. Really, anything you blame your emotions on your spouse for, or really on anyone outside of you, even anything outside of you, is emotional delegation. So I suppose some of those examples might not be purely emotional delegation. Like, you might feel annoyed when you see the socks on the floor, but not blame him. So if there's not any sense of like he's doing this to me or he's not doing this for me, then maybe you're not emotionally delegating. Maybe you're taking responsibility for your feelings, and maybe you're choosing to feel upset anyway. So this is a little complex. So mostly, let's just say, if any of those things sounded familiar, then you're most likely not choosing on purpose to feel upset, knowing that you don't have to. So therefore, you're emotionally delegating. I hope I didn't make that sound too confusing. But again, emotional delegation is really anytime you're not taking responsibility for your own experience, for your own feelings or actions, and you're believing they're coming from something that happened in your relationship or out in the world. So in the next episode, I'm going to give you some good examples of how our feelings do not come from other people's actions or external circumstances. So definitely tune into that. But I do want to say, I am not saying that external things don't contribute to our emotions. So this might seem paradoxical. It's actually not once you understand, but I am not saying we live in a vacuum. In fact, outside things absolutely do contribute to how we feel, but we are only affected when our inner world meets that outer event in a certain way. We're only affected because of how we relate to that event, in other words. So definitely tune into that episode next week or next time I release one. But I do want to give you a quick personal example of just one little moment that I've actually talked about before with my husband where I was emotionally delegating. So one day, my husband said to me, hey, should we plant some cantaloupes right outside our front door? We had a new kind of garden space right outside our front door. And I said, no, I have a plan for that space already. And I have plants coming in the mail for that space. And he was like, you do? And I sensed this tone of annoyance or even slight anger in him. And for me, his anger seemed to make me feel angry. At least that's what kind of I allowed to happen in that moment. And I replied, don't speak to me like that. So looking back, I'm very aware that his tone, his emotion, the little charge in his voice when he said, "You do?" That wasn't actually what made me angry, although in the moment it seemed like it. It was how I related to that tone. It was what I made it mean. It was how I internalized it. It was what it triggered inside of me based on my past, based on my history. So I'm going to, again, explain this in more depth in a really user-friendly way in the next episode. But I did want to just offer that little example of me emotionally delegating. So, in that circumstance, I kind of blamed his tone for how I felt. And then I reacted to it kind of with an equal, aggression. So again, I wasn't a bad person for doing that when I was emotionally delegating there, but it was leaving me disempowered, and it was ensnaring me in a conflict that did not need to be there. So it's very disempowering because when we emotionally delegate, what we're doing is depending on a very unreliable source for our emotional well-being. Because here's the thing. If your partner were a perfect partner, ideal in every way, and so skilled at loving you in just the exact right, easy way for you in every single moment, delegating your emotions to him wouldn't be a problem, right? If my husband had responded to me, "Oh, darling, that's wonderful," instead of "you do," right? My emotionally delegating wouldn't really be a problem. Me making him responsible, me hinging my emotions on him, wouldn't have been a problem. But our partners being perfect at loving us exactly right and responding to us in the most skillful, delightful ways in every moment, that's far, far from reality, right? In every relationship, no partner is perfect like that. So falling into the habit of depending on the undependable, your partner or any other human, for your emotional well-being is a fragile way to live, and it leads to emotional fragility. It leaves you way more powerless over how you feel than necessary, and way less able to experience the connected supportiveness you really want in your relationship. Because one day, your partner won't do the things you need him to do to make you feel good. One day, he won't feel like making love, or he'll be in a bad mood because work was hard, and he won't have it in him to hug you right away. Or he won't notice how good the meal you made tastes, and he won't say anything about it. Or he'll be more interested in his phones than your words, like he really actually will be. And you'll be hurt, and you'll be angry, and you'll feel unimportant and unloved. And kind of helpless, right? So if you've listened to this podcast some in the past, you will have heard me talk about this a lot. And one of the reasons I talk about this so much and so clearly is because I was a prime example of doing this all the time in my first marriage. And that's really why I feel like I can speak about it with so much knowledge and bluntness. In my first marriage, I kind of required steady, consistent reminders that my husband truly cared about me, which meant I was constantly watching for where he wasn't providing that, where he wasn't doing that well. And I was trying to get him to. Now, this might sound really familiar to you. I essentially was policing his love and care for me. Not only was that exhausting, but it was so not accepting of him and his unique ways of loving me and just his own unique ways of being a human, right? Of just being who he was. And it made him feel bad about himself. It really wore him down over time as I constantly policed him about how to show up with me. And it was never, ever my intention to wear him down and make him feel bad about himself or contribute to him feeling bad about himself. But I did lose sight of being caring and loving to him while I was so focused on getting him to be a certain way with me, because that was the only way I knew to take care of my own feelings. So many of you, if you're honest with yourself, are going to recognize the same thing going on for you in your relationship. And oh boy, the pain and suffering. It's so sad to me because now I see how unnecessary it all was. I now know my feelings are not up to him. They never were, in fact. His anger didn't make me angry. His lack of saying the thing I wanted him to didn't make me hurt or sad. The truth is, what goes on in me and how I relate to the things my partner does on the mental and nervous system level, that is where my feelings come from. And again, next episode, I'm going to go into that in much more depth. But for now, understand that some of the major problems of emotional delegation in a relationship are that, say, if you're only feeling good enough, only feeling valuable when your partner is showing you how valuable you are, if you depend on him doing or not doing specific things in order to feel appreciated or happy or any other thing you want to feel, then, well, when he is not naturally doing those things, because, again, he most assuredly won't do those things at some point or another, then you have to start getting him to do those things. Meaning you need to start controlling him and his actions. Because that will be the only way you know how to take care of your own feelings, to take charge of your own feelings, by taking charge of him. I mean, how else can you have power over your feelings if he is the source of them, right? So this is where major power struggles enter the relationship. The results of emotionally delegating in a marriage are really not good. So I've made several episodes on control and what it looks like and the toll it takes and what it leads to in relationship. And to put it clearly, when I say the word, I had to police him. I had to get him to do this, or we have to take charge of our partner as a way to take charge of our own feelings. What I mean by all of that is we have to control him. So emotional delegation leads to control issues, the habit of trying to control our partner. And I believe, after working with highly sensitive people for well over 10 years now, that HSPs do this even more than non-HSPs because of how big and how strong our feelings are. And since everyone emotionally delegates until they learn not to, we HSPs, with our big frequent feelings, will tend to try to control our partners in an effort to control our own feelings more because of those big feelings. And that's going to lead to more arguments, more what I call mothering him, more resistance from your partner's end, more defensiveness, more division. So if you haven't listened to my 3 episodes on control, those are great ones to kind of get more deeply into this, or my recent Backfiring Tactics 2.0, I think I called it that. Those all go into control a little bit more in depth and the unfortunate and unhappy effects that control has on our marriages. But emotional delegation is often also going to lead to you feeling a lot of resentment, because when he's not doing what you want him to do, when you find out that the truth is you can't really control him and therefore you can't control your feelings via controlling him, you'll probably feel resentful because he's like now the problem. He's the reason you can't feel how you want to feel. So enter lots of resentment. When you emotionally delegate, you also might find yourself kind of shutting down and shutting off in an attempt to feel better and get him to do things differently. So that can be a manipulative, slightly controlling tactic, right? When we kind of give the cold shoulder in an attempt to get him to change or give us what we want. But you might also find yourself feeling you aren't worthy, especially if your partner isn't being a doting partner and you're depending on his actions and his words to make you feel worthy. So that's one of the costs of emotional delegation, is you won't feel worthy potentially. Other results in your relationship include you feeling sorry for yourself, you feeling defeated, like you have no power, helpless, because you can't seem to change him. But you will feel you need to change him. Yeah. And that's, of course, going to keep you unhappy, again, resentful, sort of stewing in it all. And it can really show up as, again, giving the cold shoulder, withdrawing from your partner, feeling victimized, feeling like the relationship issues are all on your partner, feeling helpless. All of this, a lot of this is actually it feeds into what we call the victim mentality, which you may have heard of before. I'm not going to go into depth here, but it's basically making other people responsible for your experience, your emotional experience. And that, of course, can give rise to like retaliatory behaviors, like an eye for an eye kind of attitude, like a screw you attitude, all of which is going to lead to more conflict in relationships and can show up from your end as criticizing your partner, and really all the backfiring tactics that I talk about. So when we emotionally delegate, one of the interesting things that really happens is we lose control over ourselves. And we end up acting in ways that we don't want to actually be acting if we were to step back and ask ourselves, do I want to be this, like this? Like, is this who I really want to be? So emotional delegation really undermines who we want to be and our sense of integrity. So if any of this sounds familiar, or when and if you find yourself doing any of these things, you're going to know that you're not in a relationship at the moment that's based on love as much as it's based on need. I'm not saying that love isn't there and you can't reorient towards it, but currently, while you're depending on his behaviors and his words for how you feel, you are using the relationship to take care of your emotions. And that makes it a relationship that's based on need. You are using the relationship as a source of something that it really shouldn't be a source of. And it's a setup for an endless power struggle. And again, it's going to put you in a place of sort of emotional fragility and relating to your partner in a way that squashes love and respect and deeply loving connection. So nothing about emotional delegation will ever get you closer to having the loving, supportive relationship that you really want. Now again, there's no shame if this sounds familiar. We were set up to be this way in our culture. But it can change. You can change this. You can stop delegating your emotions and start insourcing them. Start developing emotional agency. I know because I have done it myself, and I've helped so many HSPs do the same. So what is amazing about not emotionally delegating and doing the opposite, which again is taking agency over your emotions or insourcing your emotions? Well, it's so empowering. It's so empowering. It means that you are in charge of how you feel no matter what. It means you're in the driver's seat of your emotional life. And also, therefore, your behavior, how you show up in the world, how you relate to the people you love and like, how you relate to the people you don't like so much, right? It puts you in charge of feeling how you want to feel and being who you want to be, so that you're no longer at the mercy of anyone else's not so great behavior. So you aren't like a fish on a hook swinging around at the fisherman's whim or the other person's whim. Right? That's what emotional delegating is like. You're like a fish on a hook that is out of control and in the control of the other person. No longer delegating and instead developing emotional agency gives you the power to feel comforted, to feel nourished, to feel fulfilled, to feel happy, to feel peaceful, to feel lighthearted, to feel warm-hearted, to feel love, to feel connection, to feel closeness and joy and loved, and really any feeling, whether or not your partner is doing the things that you would have needed in the past to feel that way. Essentially, emotional agency gives you emotional freedom and emotional empowerment. And it is from there that you have the absolute best capacity to make your relationship the one you want it to be. And of course, to feel how you want to feel in your relationship. And when you're feeling how you want to feel and you're not putting pressure on your partner to emotionally provide anything he might be unable to provide in that moment, because you always know how to provide that emotional nourishment for yourself, the magic is your relationship starts to look more like you want it to look. Your partner starts to be more who you want him to be naturally without you trying to control him, without you trying to force or push or try to make him be that way. It is just human nature to naturally respond in more loving, engaged, lighthearted, warm-hearted ways when our partner is showing up in an emotionally agency type way, right? An emotionally empowered way. Or when they're showing up in loving, engaged, lighthearted ways themselves. And you will absolutely show up that way when you leave behind emotional delegation and step into emotional agency and being the partner you deep down in your heart really want to be. And it is from there that you and your honey can truly enjoy each other and what each of you brings to your life together. And that is the goal, and it is 100% possible for you. So tune into next week's episode to hear more about where your feelings really come from. And if you know that you want to become an amazing agent of your own emotions and to stop emotionally delegating and really make your relationship the one you really want it to be, full of love and supportiveness and collaboration and connection and all the good things, guess what? I have just opened my coaching practice back up to taking on one-to-one clients. So if you are interested in learning more and starting coaching with me, you can learn all about it and how to begin that process over at www.hspmarriagecoaching.com, and you'll see the Work With Me Privately tab when you get to that website. Just click that. It'll tell you all about it and what to do to take that next step to working with me. I'll also put the direct link to that in the show notes. All right, my dears, be oh so well.